Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Now we're going to talk about journalism. And today, the Nigerian Union of Journalism is 70 years old. The Speaker of the House of Reps, Tajuddin Abbas, has congratulated the Nigerian Union of Journalists on the occasion of the organization's 70th anniversary. The House Speaker said the organization has continued to stand the test of time, calling for better welfare for Nigerian journalists and urged them to continue to train and retrain to be more ethical and development-oriented. He commended Nigerian journalists for what he called their immeasurable contributions to the country's democracy and development, while holding the government and its officials accountable. I'm now being joined for a recollection of some of the critical moments in the history of the Nigerian Union of Journalists and journalism generally in Nigeria by frontline journalist, editor, and entrepreneur, Akogun Tola Adeniyi. Good afternoon, Akogun Adeniyi, and thank you very much for joining us on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruben Abati, the intellectual in journalism. Happy to be with you. How are you?
Yes, sir. Well, Chief Adeniyi, you've been in this profession for over 50 years, for almost 60 years. Now it's
over 60.
Over 60 years. Okay, so you've been in the profession for as long as maybe the NUJ itself was established. Would you just like to take us through what you think journalism has done for this country? We've been here since 1859, but for today's purpose, in the last 70 years, what are those high moments in which you think journalism saved this country or contributed to the making of this country?
I think for a start, we should be paying tribute to our forefathers in journalism. And I'm starting with Ernest Cecil Colley, 1893 to 1960, who unarguably remains the greatest great-grandfather of Nigerian journalism. He was the first editor of the Daily Times and was editor of several other newspapers. And a German raised in Lagos, former prefect of King's College and so on and so forth. Cecil Colley has been underreported, under-celebrated, but on this occasion, I think we should mention his name and pay glowing tribute to him. I will also seize the same opportunity to mention Dr. Ismail Babatunde Jose, another grandfather of journalism, 1925 to 2008. Guardian described him as a legendary doyen of journalism, the mighty tree whose seedlings sprouted other titans of the profession. And BBC calls him grandfather of Nigerian journalism. We should also talk of Lateef Jakonde, who created more institutions in journalism than any other journalist known in history of this country. Jakonde, 1929 to 2021, first African chairman of IPI, first president of Newspaper Proprietors Association. We established NUJ, and we also have to talk about Enauro, Anthony Enauro, Peter Enauro. And then, of course, Jakonde established Lagos Radio, Television, Nigerian Guild of Editors, National Guild of Journalists, National Institute of Journalism. All this to the credit of Lateef Jakonde. Today, we should pay tribute to such titans. And the columnists, Olabisi Onabanjo, Alade Odunewu Alade, Ayo Jeomi, Pen Atalanta, these are great men who contributed a lot to journalism and whose efforts also helped in driving away the colonial masters and paving way for Nigerian independence. To go straight to your question, Nigerian journalists have been at the vanguard of the struggle for emancipation of Nigeria, for driving away colonialists. And I want to say that even though politicians did try, but those who suffered most in fighting for independence in Nigeria have been journalists. They are the people who went to jail more often than any other. I mean, I can't hardly remember any politician, maybe one or two or three, who went to jail because of their fight for independence. But I can count on more than 10, 20 journalists. Some of them went to jail about 6 times. Some went to jail about 10 times, like Anthony Nauru, in their fight for independence of Nigeria. So over the years, it has been the Nigerian journalists that have played the most significant role in achieving Nigerian independence and also in ensuring the success so far recorded on good governance and accountability. There are individuals, we don't need to mention all their names now, but who along the line have paid their dues in ensuring that the journalism practice is respected, is accepted, is regarded as the vanguard in this country. And it was, even though unionists, students' union, unionists, trade unionists and all that did a lot. But whatever their efforts were, like the students' union activists in Ibadan, or people like Pao Modu and other great unionists, but for the prominence given to them for their activities by the journalists, nothing would have been heard about them. So even when they tried, when other players tried, like Nigerian Beer Association under Akaba Shono, and so on and so forth, it was still the journalists that played them, that made them visible and made them recognized.
Okay.
In the community.
Okay, Adeniyi, you were at a time managing director of Daily Times. You ran Daily Times. Apart from being reporter, editor, columnist, and doing almost everything that needed to be done. You came back as MD Daily Times. But there are 2 issues that journalists complain about: poor welfare of journalists, and the NUJ over the years has been outspoken in terms of the poor welfare of journalists. And the second has been the sacrifice that journalists have had to make. Today, March 16, is actually the birthday of Adeniyi of the Newswatch Group. He was born March 16, 1947. If he were alive, he would have been 78 years old today. But you all know what happened to him. He ended as a martyr of the profession. Poor welfare, and then the sacrifice that many journalists have made. Adeniyi and so many others.
Yes, talking about welfare, I had the opportunity on several occasions to talk about welfare. And looking back, I always give kudos to Babatunde Jose as chairman, managing director of Daily Times. Welfare was uppermost in his as high point of its administration. Jose encouraged journalists, he would pay your dues. Jose gave us accommodation, gave us even dress allowance. In my time in '74, when I was the director of Nigerian Journalism Institute, Daily Times Training Institute, Joseph gave me a sprawling 4-bedroom apartment to stay, to the extent that it was a lawyer, a British trained lawyer, who was living in my boys' quarters. That is to show the degree of respect and which Babatunde Jose attached to those working with him. He brought in so many journalists and paid us handsomely. Jose also encouraged columnists because apart from your salary, he was making sure that for every column you wrote, you'll be paid. And that, again, we found lacking these days. In his time, Jose knew the names of all the drivers, all the dispatch riders. He would visit them if they were involved in accident and so on and so forth. And the reporters were always assured of their protection and that the paper will fight for them, even if they are arrested and so on. Later on, we found that some newspaper proprietors started treating journalists and those working under them as servants, forgetting that without the sacrifice of the journalists working for them, their newspaper outfits or their radio stations will be nowhere to be found. What I'm saying in essence, therefore, is that the welfare of journalists had always been uppermost in the minds of those pioneer leaders that we had. And over time, that disappeared. And it has affected the quality of journalism practice. It has also affected the recruitment of journalists into the profession. Because if they're not well paid and they're not well remunerated, it's difficult to get them in. Unlike in the days of Jose, who brought in even people from Central Bank. He brought in economists from Central Bank, brought in professors from University of Lagos to work in Daily Times. In other words, they preferred the salary of Daily Times to whatever they were earning in Central Bank, to whatever they were earning in the universities. And it's still part of the welfare that we are talking about. But over the years, that had not been so. I remember there was a proprietor who will say, he will give job to about 4 people. I will say, look, gentlemen, I'm employing 4 of you, but I'm going to pay you the salary of 1 person. So if it's okay for you to share the salary of 1 person, 4 of you, go ahead. If it's not comfortable for you, then go. That is to the extent to which those who had the opportunity to run newspaper offices reduced the value of journalism practice to almost nada. And for over the years, the Union of Journalists and other stakeholders have been fighting for this welfare package. And I hope sooner or later it will be realizable. But I'm also warned that the prices of all the input into journalism practice, the newsprint, ink, and all that, even radio stations, television stations, all the things needed to run these outfits had also gone haywire, so that the proprietors and entrepreneurs themselves are really finding it difficult to make ends meet. And that again has affected everything to do with our profession.
But sir, how about the danger? Journalism will appear to be like a dangerous job. People have been killed, they've been jailed, they've been brutalized. So much violence against journalists in this Nigeria.
Yes. It's unfortunate, and it's a peculiarity of all the so-called developing countries. And when people take power, they think of themselves as God, and they don't brook any opposition. And it's only the journalists that can only expose the corruption going on in many governments. And that is why the journalists and government people are always at loggerheads. It is unfortunate that rather than see journalists as partners in progress, those who, by crook or hook, have been able to corner government and corner leadership of the various countries have always been there to brutalize those who oppose them. And Nigerian journalists have been most unfortunate in this regard, because I mean, right even maybe shortly after 1966, Nigeria had been under the jackboot of military, and military mantra is kill and go. I mean, they have kill and go, and they don't take prisoners. All they do is make sure that once you oppose them, it's either you are killed or you disappear. And like you rightly said, there have been so many examples of journalists in Nigeria who either disappeared or killed or maltreated or maimed or whatever. So many things had happened. That journalism practice in Nigeria is perhaps the most dangerous job, the most dangerous occupation in this country today, which is unfortunate. And I don't see that ending soon, because the more governments change, the more governments we have, the more brutal the successive governments become. And so rather than have a respite, that journalists will have a better time, they are facing more dangerous times, because those who progressively corner power in this country have continued to grow worse and to treat opposition as enemy. And whoever complains or whoever tries to tell them that this is the way to go is either death or imprisonment or whatever, which is also unfortunate.
Who actually is a journalist? Because today it's a bit confusing to know who a journalist is. They now say there are some people called citizen journalists. Anybody with a phone, everybody is doing TikTok, everybody is doing Instagram, and they're also, performing the basic functions of trained journalists. You were director of the Nigerian Institute of Journalism, but this citizen journalist, are they journalists? Is the newspaper dying? Some people have written essays that the newspaper will soon die, and journalism as we know it has vanished. Do you share that view?
Well, it's unfortunate again, we want to blame technology for what is happening. Technology has made it easy for people who could afford just 500 naira or 1,000 naira to buy a recharge card. And then they will do some video, they will do some things and put them on Facebook or any social media outlet and consider themselves as writers or as journalists, as reporters and so on, which is unfortunate. And that has actually confused the public. It has also lowered the status and stature of the practicing journalist. But the journalist is the man who really trains in the profession. I mean, lawyers undergo training, doctors undergo training. If you didn't train as a doctor, you cannot call yourself a doctor. If you didn't train as a lawyer, you shouldn't call yourself a lawyer. Unfortunately, journalism, the most important instrument is your pen or your voice or whatever. Unlike in medicine, unlike in law, which makes it unfortunate for those who are trained in journalism. I would say that the idea of citizen journalism is rubbish, and I am sure that the public is also becoming more aware of who the journalist is and who the fake ones are. Whether journalism is going to die or whether journalists will vanish, I don't think so. What I think should happen is that new methods, new approaches should be devised by practitioners. I believe that in a country like this, or in a community like this, where there's so much vanity, in a community where people like to see themselves on pages of newspapers, I think what the journalists or what the entrepreneurs should now do is to make sure that you have serious section in the newspaper published and another section for just publishing or publicizing events. Because people like to see their wedding events, they want to see their birthday parties, they want to see all those published and advertised. So if you have a newspaper that caters for seriousness on one side and the one that caters for unseriousness on the other side, I think they can still go ahead. I don't think the paper would die. When radio broadcast started, people thought that would be the end of newspapers. And when printing started, some people thought that would be the end. But people still read books in spite of Google, in spite of all search engines. What I'm saying, therefore, is that journalists and media entrepreneurs will have to devise new ways to meet the new challenges and make sure that they stay on course and stay in the profession. I don't think journalism will die. I don't think journalists will die. The unserious ones, the fake ones, of course, will disappear. Because like most bloggers are dying out, and most people who just talk all sorts of nonsense in social media, they are also disappearing because they are getting less attention, they are getting less readership, they are getting less followership, and I can see some of them, or most of them, disappearing soon. I'm saying in essence, therefore, that journalism practice will continue, journalists will continue, and serious ones will survive.
Okay, Adeniyi, well, over 60 years in this profession.
Yes.
I mean, we hardly celebrate ourselves in this profession. We're too busy reporting other people. Some of them are just outright ingrates. They get iconized by journalists and they grow swollen heads and all that. But in other words, I'd like you to talk about some of the highlights of your own career as a kind of lesson for the younger generation of journalists who are just coming up.
Well, truth is, I mean, there are various strata for my own career as regional editor of Daily Times in the West, in Ibadan. That will be, I mean, ensuring investigative journalism and also making sure that you interview people. I think serious journalists must learn and master the art of interviewing and writing stories from interviewing people who make news. And they also do a lot of research before they interview people. But more than that, I also believe that journalists over the years, which I did in my own time, must always believe that the journalist is by far better. In any case, as far as I'm concerned, journalism is the most influential profession on earth. And therefore, I don't see why a journalist should be running kube to any governor's office. I don't see why any journalist should consider himself inferior to a governor or to a minister or to anybody who is holding temporary office. As a journalist, your career, your profession, you don't retire from your profession. A journalist will remain journalist even at 70, at 80, at 90. You may retire from your position as an editor, as a government spokesperson, and so on. But if you're a profession, if you're a writer, if you're a journalist, you don't retire from your profession. You remain a journalist forever. You remain a doctor forever. You retire from office, but you don't retire from your profession. That is one thing that I believe that oncoming journalists should recognize and be very, very sure of themselves. It's important, very important, that a journalist must be self-respecting. A journalist must always dress well, must always be well attired, must always must have a lot of self-confidence. That is why a journalist can walk into any president's office or any governor's office and hold your head high. And that has also informed my own my career in journalism. I also believe in what is called campaign journalism, because I think it was Daily Times that campaigned for the erection or construction of the first overhead bridge in Nigeria, the one on the Ikorodu Road, which was in 73, 74, after campaigning for its necessity and then talking to Brigadier Johnson to make sure that overhead bridge or pedestrian bridge is constructed. Campaign journalism is important. That is, a journalist will take a stand and then campaign for it and make sure that it's actualized. And journalists should also set the agenda. We should not wait for these temporary holders of power to set agenda for development of the country or the agenda for development of the community. It's the journalists and the colleagues that should always form the consortium of designing how the society should grow and how far and where direction should be, not those holding temporary power. I'm saying in a sense that the journalists must set agenda, and it is in that they will continue to earn the respect both of the government and of the people they serve.
Well, Adeniyi, just before we go, I just one more question.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the media landscape now, there are many politicians or people with political ambitions who are setting up newspapers, who are setting up broadcast stations, simply to pursue their own political ambitions. And then, of course, the basic principle is that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And you find journalists, having issues with objectivity, with principles, because they have to dance to the tune of the piper. Do you think it's a threat to journalistic integrity that, people with other purposes other than the making of a good society are just using journalism as a special purpose vehicle, and they dictate to the professionals how their job should be done?
Well, the implications are very, very, very dire, because who pays the piper, whatever. It's unfortunate that anybody with some money will just say setting up a newspaper office or just setting up online paper or setting up a television and radio station. Again, I can say I'm not bothered about such developments because I know they'll be short-lived. They'll be short-lived. I mean, you can't play on people's intelligence. You cannot bamboozle people with your money or with your position for too long. So we've seen several of them in those days in Ibadan. I don't want to mention the names. I think about 6, 7 newspapers, were established by some money bags, and such papers didn't last 2 years, and all the employees had to leave. Journalists that are not given the right treatment by their serious employers sometimes when they see these new openings, they just rush there. But they rush out because, one, no dignity attached, no stuff, no serious stuff. And so such papers that are being established by emergency novel rich will not go far. So I'm not bothered about that. What I'm bothered about, like you rightly observed, is journalists promoting people who, under normal circumstances, should not be promoted. The journalists must always be serious, must always know who to promote, must know who to really bring to the forefront. You can't just promote people that you know have no brains, have no integrity, have no pedigree, and because they have money or because they force themselves into the Senate or into the House of Assembly or into whatever position, you start promoting them and making whatever they say, even when they cough, you make it headline news in your newspaper. That is what Nigerian journalists must guide against, and that is a serious issue that the executives of all the NUJ and other media organizations must ensure that they do something about. They should be very, very critical of people they promote. They should be very critical. And like you rightly said, we don't promote ourselves. We don't promote ourselves, which is also unfortunate. Journalists need to celebrate themselves once in a while. Celebrate those of our members who are distinguished. Celebrate those who have shown class. It is important to us to encourage others to aspire to the level which those being celebrated have gone, but not just to leave us in the cold and continue promoting those who really do not deserve to be promoted. It is unfortunate, but I don't think we should worry about money bags who are setting up papers here and there, or those who are setting mushrooms radio stations here and there. They're always short-lived. It won't last. It doesn't bother me. I shouldn't bother anybody, because there's no seriousness attached to what they are doing.
Well,
what is important is that journalists must continue to interrogate and know those they should promote and know those they should ignore.
On that note, I would like to thank you very much, Tola Adeniyi, for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday talk show.